Get out of the car. Sir, I have a delivery. I don't care what you have. Miller's hand was already on the door handle, already pulling. You people always got somewhere to be. Marcus stepped out, both hands up, box still in his arms. $500, Miller said, cash, right now, or I call the tow truck and you explain to your boss why the van is gone. Marcus set the box on the hood, reached into the glove compartment, slow, deliberate, placed the envelope on the roof of the car without a word. Miller grabbed it, counted it fast, fingers moving through 500s, and shoved it into his jacket. The door lock snapped shut. All four. The sound cracked across the empty street like a single gunshot. 17 people on that block heard it. Miller's hand froze on his radio and...
Unbelievable. He took the bribe. He towed the van anyway, but he just swallowed the bait. Keep watching.
The red and blue lights came without warning, splitting the gray Detroit afternoon like a blade through wet paper. Marcus Washington had been doing 31 miles per hour in a 30 zone. It was a fact he knew with the particular precision of a man who had reasons to know exactly how fast he was driving, at every moment, of every minute, of this specific Tuesday. He checked his mirrors. He pulled the delivery van smoothly to the curb. He cut the engine before the patrol car had fully stopped behind him. No sudden movements, no theater, just compliance performed with the practiced calm of someone who understood that the choreography of this moment mattered more than almost anything else. He reached for the cracked plastic clipboard on the passenger seat. He paused. The heavy cardboard box was still there exactly where he had placed it 20 minutes ago, positioned squarely in the center of the passenger seat, with a deliberateness that looked incidental and was anything but. He adjusted it slightly, centering it with 2 fingers against the gray afternoon light coming through the windshield. Then he set the clipboard on top of the box. He waited. Outside, the patrol car door opened and closed with the solid, expensive sound of a well-maintained vehicle. Officer Derek Miller walked like a man who had never been told no. Not no, I disagree with you. Not no, you are incorrect. Certainly not no, you do not have the authority to do that. He walked with the particular rolling weight of someone whose entire professional life had confirmed at every turn that the space he occupied was his by right. The people he approached were problems to be managed, not citizens to be served. His boots were polished to a mirror finish despite the slush and road salt that coated the curb. His aviator sunglasses caught the pulse of his own light bar. They threw it back in cold mirrored flashes. He came to Marcus's window. He stood there for a full 4 seconds before saying anything. A silence that was not neutral, a demonstration. Marcus rolled the window down. License, registration, proof of insurance, Miller said. Not a question, a recitation. Good afternoon, officer, Marcus said. Can I ask the reason for the stop? The sunglasses regarded him with their blank silver surface. Broken taillight. License, registration, proof of insurance. Marcus looked into those mirrored lenses. He saw 2 small versions of himself, a black man in a faded brown delivery jacket with fraying cuffs holding a cracked plastic clipboard sitting in a van that smelled of cold cardboard and engine exhaust. He looked careful. He looked patient. He looked like exactly what Officer Miller thought he was looking at. He handed over the documents. Miller took them without acknowledgement. He walked back to his patrol car. This was also a demonstration. The walk back was unhurried. The pause at the vehicle was extended. The return equally slow. Every second of it said the same thing: your time is not valuable. Marcus used those minutes to look straight ahead through the windshield. He looked at the gray industrial street before him, at the old warehouses with their broken, guttered roof lines, at the single leafless tree growing through a crack in the concrete median, at the sky the color of dirty aluminum pressing down on all of it. Detroit in February. The city had a specific quality of cold that was not just temperature but atmosphere, a cold that carried history in it, a cold that remembered every broken promise the place had ever absorbed. It held them suspended in the air, like the sediment Marcus had watched hang in the water of the Bonda Sea 2 years ago during a completely different kind of work. He brought his attention back to the present. Miller returned to the window. He held the documents out without handing them over, making Marcus reach for them. You aware your left rear taillight is out? I was not aware of that, officer. I will get it looked at today. Where are you headed? Finishing my delivery route. I have 3 remaining stops on the east side. What are you delivering? Marcus reached for the clipboard, lifting it slightly from the top of the cardboard box. The motion was unhurried, deliberate. He turned the top page of the delivery manifest toward Miller. The page showed a standard commercial delivery sheet, company logo, date, route number, signature lines, itemized packages. It was a perfectly ordinary page. What it did not show, what it could not show from Miller's angle and vantage point, was the fact that every page beneath it was completely blank. Electronic components, Marcus said. Business supplies, standard freight. Miller looked at the manifest. He looked at it for exactly as long as it took him to decide he was not interested in the manifest. His gaze had already moved to the cardboard box on the passenger seat. It was unremarkable in every visible respect: brown corrugated cardboard sealed with standard packing tape, approximately the size of a microwave oven, no markings. It sat on the seat with the slightly anonymous heaviness of a box that contained something dense. It did not advertise what. What is in the box? That one is marked for delivery at my next stop, Marcus said. Electronic components as listed on the manifest. Miller looked at the box for another moment. Then he looked at Marcus. The mirrored lenses gave nothing back. Step out of the vehicle. Marcus opened the door. He stepped out onto the freezing asphalt. The cold hit him immediately, finding the gaps at his collar and wrists. The wind off the open stretch of road carried the particular urban smell of this block diesel exhaust, old concrete, something chemical from the industrial unit 3 buildings down. He stood beside the van with his hands visible at his sides. The afternoon light hit him flat gray and without warmth. Miller circled the van slowly. He took his time at the rear, crouching slightly to examine the tail light. It was Marcus knew a functional light. He had checked it himself that morning in the parking structure off Lafayette under the fluorescent lights before loading the van and driving to the staging point. The tail light worked, but the stop had never been about the tail light. Both of them were now past the point of pretending otherwise. Miller stood up from his examination. He looked at Marcus across the roof of the van. His expression managed to be entirely pleasant and entirely without warmth simultaneously. It was the expression of a man who had done this many times and found it easy. The way a fisherman looks at the water before casting. Not with cruelty, but with the casual confidence of someone who expects to catch something. You got any outstanding violations? Any warrants? No, sir. You been drinking today? No, sir. You seem nervous. I am standing on a freezing street in February, Marcus said, his voice carrying nothing except the words themselves, being questioned about a working tail light. I am not nervous. I am cold. Something shifted very slightly in Miller's posture. Not anger exactly. More like the recalibration of a predator that has encountered unexpected resistance, deciding how to classify it. He came back around to the driver's side. He stood close enough that Marcus could see his own reflection in miniature in both mirrored lenses. Close enough that the proximity was a statement. I am going to need you to wait here while I run your plates, Miller said. Of course, Marcus said. Miller walked back to his patrol car. This time Marcus heard the radio. He could not make out the words. He recognized the cadence, the flat administrative rhythm of a man making a call that was not going through dispatch, a personal call, or something routed differently. Marcus looked down at his left wrist, at the cheap digital watch with its scratched plastic face and its faded rubber strap. The display showed 3:47 p.m. He looked at the number for a moment. His expression gave away absolutely nothing. 3 blocks away, in a converted delivery van with blacked-out windows and a generator running on its own quiet circuit. A monitoring system had been recording audio and video since Marcus left the staging point. It received a clean, unbroken feed from the cardboard box on the passenger seat. The 2 federal agents watching the screen adjusted their headsets. They waited. But Miller had no idea. This routine traffic stop was already being broadcast live to a mobile command center 3 blocks away. Miller came back from the patrol car with the particular unhurried walk of a man who had already decided how this was going to end. He held Marcus's license and registration in one hand. He was not offering them back. That detail alone told Marcus everything about the next 5 minutes. When a cop intends to release you, the documents come forward. When a cop intends to use the documents as a prop in something else entirely, they stay in his hand, held slightly behind the thigh, casual and possessive. The way a card player holds a hand he has already decided to play. "Mr. Washington," Miller said, and the Mr. carried a specific weight. The weight of a word used not as courtesy but as a container for its opposite. "I am going to be straight with you." "I appreciate that," Marcus said. "Your registration shows this vehicle is registered to a company called Eastside Distribution, LLC. Miller turned the registration card over in his fingers without looking at it. "I am not finding that company in any active commercial registry for Wayne County." "The company is registered in Delaware," Marcus said. "Many commercial freight operators incorporate in Delaware for tax structure purposes. The federal EIN is printed at the bottom of that card." A pause. Miller had not looked at the bottom of the card. He looked now, briefly, then back at Marcus. "That may be," he said, "but I have got a vehicle on my street with a busted light, a registration I cannot immediately verify, and a driver who is giving me a lot of very specific information very quickly." He tilted his head slightly. "In my experience, people who know a lot of technical details about their own paperwork are usually either lawyers or people who have had a lot of practice explaining themselves to police." "I am a delivery driver," Marcus said, "who has had a lot of practice explaining himself to police." The silence that followed that sentence was the kind of silence that has texture. Miller let it sit for 3 full seconds before he spoke again. "I am going to need to verify this registration independently," he said. "That is going to take some time. In the meantime, I cannot allow an unverified commercial vehicle to continue operating on a municipal road. Department policy." "Could you tell me," Marcus said, his voice not changing temperature by a single degree, "specifically which section of the Detroit Municipal Vehicle Code requires independent verification of a federally registered commercial vehicle on the basis of a registration that is visibly current and properly formatted?" Miller went very still. It was a small stillness, the kind that someone not paying close attention would not notice. But Marcus was paying close attention. He had been paying close attention since the moment those lights first appeared in his mirror. He saw it, the fractional pause of a man whose script has been interrupted by a line he did not expect. Miller had run this play many times. He knew its rhythms. He knew its beats. He knew how the target was supposed to respond at this point in the sequence. The target was supposed to respond with anxiety, with questions, with the particular desperate helpfulness of someone who needed the moment to be over. Marcus had responded with a citation request. The aviator lenses reflected the gray sky. "You a lawyer, Mr. Washington?" "No, sir. I am a delivery driver who is going to be late for his next stop." "That," Miller said, and now something had shifted in his voice. A settling of weight, a dropping of the performance layer down to something more direct underneath. "That is going to be a problem, because I am looking at this vehicle and I am seeing issues. The tail light, the registration question, and now I am noticing the front left tire looks low to me." Marcus looked at the front left tire. It was not low. It was inflated to exactly 36 psi. He had verified it that morning with a gauge borrowed from the equipment locker at the mobile command unit, under fluorescent lights, before loading the van, before driving to the staging point. He looked at the tire for precisely as long as it deserved, 1 second. Then he looked back at Miller. That was when he heard it. The sound arrived before the vehicle was visible, a low diesel grumble that bounced off the warehouse walls. It filled the cold air with the particular resonance of a heavy engine running at idle. Then the tow truck came around the corner from Meldrum Street, rust orange cab, the company name on the door panel, half obscured by road grime, the flatbed empty, the hook assembly visible at the rear. It did not pass. It slowed. It pulled in behind Miller's patrol car with the easy familiarity of a vehicle arriving at a scheduled appointment. Marcus looked at the tow truck. He looked at Miller. He looked at his watch, 3:52 p.m. He pressed the watch face twice with the pad of his index finger. 2 short taps, a gesture so small, so embedded in the ordinary motion of checking the time that it registered as nothing. His face registered nothing. His hands were loose at his sides. The wind came off the open road. It found the fraying collar of his delivery jacket. He did not move against it. That is Stan, Miller said, nodding toward the truck without looking at it, keeping his eyes on Marcus with the mirrored lenses that gave back only reflection. Stan runs the municipal impound contract on this corridor. Good man, very efficient. If I have to call this vehicle in for impound, he continued, Stan will have it off the street inside of 10 minutes. Then we are looking at an impound processing fee, a storage fee per day, a reinspection fee before release, and a minimum of 72 hours before you can even begin the retrieval paperwork. He paused, letting the numbers settle like stones dropped into still water. That is a significant inconvenience, Marcus said. It does not have to be, Miller said, and now his voice had completed its transition, arrived at its destination, smooth, direct, and carrying the weight of a man who believed entirely in his own impunity. A lot of times in situations like this, when a driver is cooperative and we can resolve the verification issue quickly and informally, I have some discretion about how I classify the stop. Discretion is a valuable thing, Mr. Washington. It keeps paperwork off everybody's desk. Marcus looked at the single worn key on its cheap plastic ring, still in the ignition of the van, visible through the driver's window. He looked at Miller's hand where the heavy key ring with its dozen municipal keys hung from one finger, swinging very slightly in the cold air, catching the light with a dull metallic flash. He looked at the tow truck where Stan had cut the engine and was now sitting in the cab with the window cracked watching. I understand the situation, Marcus said. I thought you might, Miller said. If Miller had been paying attention to Marcus's exact wording, he might have run while he still had the chance. Stan climbed out of the tow truck cab with the unhurried ease of a man who spent most of his professional life waiting for other people's problems to become his opportunity. He was thick across the shoulders, wearing a gray work shirt with a grease stain on the left breast pocket. The stain had been through the wash enough times to become a permanent feature rather than an accident. The gold chain around his neck was heavy and real, resting against the open collar of his shirt, with the particular visibility of jewelry worn not for elegance but for announcement. He did not speak when he approached. He simply came to stand beside Miller, the practiced positioning of a man who had taken this exact position beside this exact officer on this exact type of street corner enough times that it required no discussion. The two of them together, Miller with his mirrored lenses, his polished boots, and his key ring swinging from one finger, Stan with his gold chain, his diesel-stained hands, and his mild, patient expression formed a unit. Marcus had seen units like this before, not on streets like this one, in document rooms, deposition transcripts, and financial records. The same fundamental structure, one man with a badge to make the threat credible, one man with a service to make the threat operational, and between them a gap that looked like procedure but functioned like a trap. 500, Miller said. He did not preface it. He did not construct an explanation around it. He simply said the number, the way a man states the price of a thing he is selling in a transaction where the buyer has no alternative vendor. Marcus said nothing. 500 cash right now, Miller continued, and I reclassify this as a verbal warning. Taillight violation, no impound, no report. You are back on your route in 10 minutes. Miller tilted his head slightly. Or Stan hooks the van, it goes to the yard on East Forest, and you start making phone calls. Your choice, Mr. Washington. But I would make it quickly because Stan is on a schedule. Stan, who was apparently on a schedule, showed no evidence of being on a schedule. He looked at the van with the mild professional interest of a man assessing the ease of a job, not its urgency. Marcus looked at Miller for a moment, then he looked at the van. Then he looked down at the cracked asphalt between his feet. Something moved across his face. It could have been resignation. It could have been calculation. To the two federal agents watching a monitor in a blacked-out van 3 blocks away, it was clearly and identifiably both simultaneously. He reached into the inner pocket of his faded delivery jacket. The wallet was worn leather dark brown, the kind of wallet that had been carried long enough to take the shape of the pocket it lived in. He opened it with both hands. He looked inside for a moment. What he found there made him look up at Miller with an expression that contained something genuine, not performance, not calculation, but the specific human quality of a man standing at the bottom of a system that has decided he does not matter. $500, Marcus said quietly. $500, Miller confirmed. Marcus pulled the bills out one at a time. 5 of them, each one crisp, clean, and new. The kind of clean that paper money has when it has not been folded into a wallet over weeks of ordinary use but has instead been placed there recently and deliberately. He held them in his hand. He looked at them for one moment. In that moment, his thumb pressed against the face of each bill in sequence. A slow, firm pressure. The pad of his thumb finding the center of each note and pressing as if testing the weight of the paper, as if confirming something about its texture. He held the stack out toward Miller. Miller took it with the ease of a man receiving something that already belonged to him. He flicked through the bills once with practiced fingers. He folded them into the breast pocket of his uniform jacket. He did not count them loudly. He did not make a show of it. The transaction had its own practiced discretion, the discretion of a routine, and the routine was the most disturbing thing about it. More disturbing than the amount, more disturbing than the daylight, more disturbing than the absolute confidence with which it was conducted, because a routine means repetition, and repetition means this street and others like it had absorbed this exact transaction many times before Marcus arrived on it. "Smart man," Miller said. Stan was already moving back toward the tow truck. "One moment," Marcus said. Miller paused, the $500 already in his pocket, already spent in whatever internal accounting he kept for money that arrived this way. He looked at Marcus with the mild curiosity of a man who cannot imagine what addition could possibly be made to a completed transaction. "I want to confirm something for my own records," Marcus said. His voice had returned to the measured technical register he had used when he asked about the municipal code, not aggressive, not servile, occupying a middle space that Miller had still not correctly classified. "You are releasing the vehicle. No impound filing. No violation on record. That is the agreement." "That is the agreement," Miller said. "And the tail light. What about it, the verbal warning you mentioned? That is how this stop is being classified in your log. A verbal warning for a tail light." Miller looked at him with the mirrored lenses for a long moment. "You worried about your driving record, Mr. Washington?" "I am thorough," Marcus said. "I like to understand exactly what has occurred." Something in Miller's expression shifted, not quite amusement, not quite irritation, sitting between them a kind of reflexive contempt for a man who was asking procedural questions after handing over $500 in cash on a public street. He had already dismissed Marcus as a threat before Marcus had opened his wallet. The questions read to Miller as the harmless fussiness of a man who had lost and was trying to feel less lost by cataloging the terms of the loss. "Verbal warning," Miller said. "Tail light. That is all this was." Marcus nodded. On the sidewalk to the left, neither of the two men had noticed the teenage girl standing near the bus shelter. She had been there for the past 4 minutes, her phone raised angled, her hands not entirely steady in the February wind. Marcus was giving them exactly what they wanted. But in the federal justice system, getting exactly what you ask for is often the quickest way to prison.
Wait, no way. He actually handed over $500 in cash to a dirty cop in broad daylight. If that were me, I would be screaming for a supervisor or a lawyer right then and there. Imagine feeling so powerless that paying a corrupt bribe seems like your only option to keep your job. Some people never learn.
The girl had not moved. Most people on this block had performed the same quiet calculation when Miller's lights first appeared, the sidewalk arithmetic of urban self-preservation. They had found reasons to be somewhere else. A man walking a dog had turned the corner onto Meldrum without breaking stride. 2 workers from the warehouse loading dock had stepped back inside. The metal door had closed behind them with a sound like a period ending a sentence. This was not cowardice. It was a learned and rational response, an environment where proximity to a police interaction carried its own category of risk, where witnessing the wrong thing could make you the next thing witnessed. But the girl had not moved. She was 16, maybe 17, wearing a puffy red coat that was too big for her, the sleeves coming down past her wrists. She was standing at the near end of the bus shelter. Her phone was up. Her body was slightly angled, the way someone stands when they are trying to look like they are doing something other than what they are doing. She was recording. She had been recording since before Stan arrived. That meant she had captured the key ring, the diesel arrival, the wallet, the bills. All of it in sequence. All of it in the flat gray light of a February afternoon that was, from a documentation standpoint, actually ideal. No harsh shadows, no glare. Just clean, diffused light falling evenly across every transaction that had occurred on this curb. Marcus had seen her almost immediately. He had not looked at her directly. He had allowed his gaze to pass across her twice in the natural course of the ordinary eye movements of a man standing on a street corner. In those two passes, he had registered phone-up angle, correct position, stable hands, cold but not moving. He had made no signal. He had given no acknowledgement. He had done nothing that would cause Miller to follow his eye line. Then at the moment when Stan was climbing back into the tow truck cab and Miller was turning away with the satisfied closing chapter posture of a man whose business was concluded, Marcus looked directly at the lens of Maya's phone for exactly 1/4 of 1 second. He gave her the smallest nod that could still be classified as a nod. She did not react visibly. She steadied her hands. She kept recording. It was Mr. Henderson who spoke first. He had been there longer than Maya, standing at the other end of the bus shelter with a wooden cane planted on the sidewalk, both hands wrapped around its handle, wearing a gray wool coat that had been good once and was still respectable, watching the scene with the expression of a man who has seen this particular play performed before and finds it no less painful for its familiarity. How was in his 70s. A face that carried the specific topography of a life lived in this city across its various decades of expansion and contraction, hope and abandonment. He had the eyes of someone who had long ago made his peace with the distance between how things should work and how they did. He came forward now, slowly, the cane finding the uneven asphalt with each step. "Son," he said to Marcus, and the word carried a specific weight, not condescension, not pity, but the weight of a man trying to pass something across a distance he knows he cannot fully close. "You paid the man. Leave it alone now." "I am not doing anything, sir," Marcus said. "I know you are not," Mr. Henderson said. "I am telling you to keep not doing anything. Get back in your van and drive away. That is the move." Miller had turned back. He was watching Mr. Henderson with the expression of a man regarding something beneath his notice but also somewhat in his way. "Sir," he said, and the "sir" was the same container as the "Mr." had been, a formal word used to deliver informal contempt. "This is an active traffic stop. I am going to ask you to step back." "My stop is right here," Mr. Henderson said, and something in his voice did not change when he addressed Miller. It did not soften. It did not harden. It stayed at precisely the same register it had used with Marcus, which was itself a kind of statement. "I am waiting for the number 14 bus, same as I do every Tuesday. I have been waiting for the number 14 bus on this corner since before you were born, officer." Miller looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Maya. She lowered the phone slightly when his gaze hit her, a reflex, but she did not put it away. "You recording this?" Miller said. He walked toward her with the rolling, deliberate stride covering the distance between them in 8 steps. He stopped 3 feet away. He looked down at her with the mirrored lenses and the full physical apparatus of his uniform, his authority, and his 6 feet of height. He waited. Maya looked up at him. Her jaw was set. Her hands were still not entirely steady. "It is a public street," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. She knew it. Marcus could see her know it. He could see the quick internal adjustment she made. She said it again. "It is a public street." "It is a public street," Miller agreed pleasantly. "And you are a minor standing on it with a phone in my face during an active law enforcement action," he continued. "And if I determine you are interfering with that action, I can detain you for questioning and contact your parents or guardian." He paused. "How old are you?" "Old enough to stand on a public street," Maya said. Miller held the look for 4 more seconds. Then he smiled. A smile with nothing behind it. He turned back toward Marcus and Mr. Henderson with a short sound that was not quite a laugh. "You people," he said, shaking his head. He said it with the weariness of a man performing exasperation for an audience he does not respect. The weariness of someone who has never seriously considered that the audience might be more than an audience. Marcus was watching Miller say it. I was also watching the faint red pulse from the small hole in the side of the cardboard box on the passenger seat of the van. Regular, quiet, and steady as a heartbeat, it had been pulsing without interruption since 3:47 p.m. It was still pulsing now. The crowd thought they were watching a man lose his dignity, but they were actually watching a masterclass in gathering federal evidence. If you want to see how this corrupt cop's shakedown blows up in his face, you know what to do. Now back to Marcus's delivery van. Miller laughed. It was not the performative laugh of a man making a point. It was the genuine, released laugh of a man who had arrived at the moment he had been building toward. He found it satisfying in the uncomplicated way that only people without self-awareness can find their own cruelty satisfying. He pulled the 5 bills from his breast pocket. He held them up between 2 fingers, fanning them slightly. The crisp new hundreds caught the gray afternoon light with a clean, almost institutional brightness. "Thanks for the bonus, boy," he said. He paused. "Hook it up, Stan." The word landed on the cold air. It stayed there. Mr. Henderson's hands tightened on the top of his cane. Maya's phone stayed up. Marcus stood on the freezing asphalt. He heard the word. He filed it in the same internal register where he had been filing everything else since 3:47 p.m. with precision and without reaction. Because reaction was not what this moment required. He had known since long before today that the moments requiring the most from a person were precisely the moments that looked from the outside like a person giving the least. Stan had the hook moving before Miller finished the sentence. The sound it made crossing the asphalt was the sound of something heavy and indifferent, a steel-on-concrete drag that carried no malice and no mercy, because the implement did not deal in either. It simply weighed what it weighed. It moved as it moved. It did the work it was designed to do without consulting anyone's feelings about it. The chain fed out from the drum with a mechanical clatter. Stan swung the hook toward the van's front subframe with the practiced economy of a man who had attached hooks to unwilling vehicles in every weather condition this city produced. Marcus watched it happen. He stood with his hands at his sides, his faded delivery jacket doing inadequate work against the February wind. He watched Stan crouch at the front of the van. He watched him work the hook into position with the quick, sure movements of experience. He watched Miller standing with his weight on one heel, still holding the bills loosely between his fingers. Watching Marcus watch the process with the particular satisfaction of a man who has mistaken compliance for defeat. The crowd had not dispersed entirely. There were 4 people visible on this block. Mr. Henderson at the bus shelter. Maya 3 feet to his left, a man in a hard hat who had stopped on the opposite sidewalk and was watching with his hands in his jacket pockets, and a woman farther down who had paused with grocery bags hanging from both fists. None of them spoke. The scene had the quality of a public execution, not in its violence but in its social function. The gathered witness, the formalized humiliation, the demonstration of what happens to people who are not protected by the right kinds of power on the right kinds of streets. Miller put the bills back in his pocket. "Here is what is going to happen," he said to Marcus. His voice had the relaxed tutorial quality of a man explaining something simple to someone slow. "Stan is going to tow your vehicle to the yard on East Forest. You are going to call the number on the impound notice, which you will receive by mail in approximately 5 to 7 business days, and you are going to begin the retrieval process, which involves a reinspection fee, a storage fee for each day. The vehicle is on the lot, and a processing fee for the paperwork. Total will run you somewhere between $800 and $1,200, he continued, depending on how long it takes you to get your paperwork together. He paused. Plus the $500 you already paid, of course. Consider that a processing fee for my time. Mr. Henderson made a sound that was not a word. You told me, Marcus said, his voice level quiet and utterly without tremor, that $500 resolved the stop. You told me there would be no impound. You stated that explicitly. I told you I had discretion, Miller said, and I am exercising it. I looked at this vehicle again, and I have got additional concerns. The front left tire, the registration question I mentioned earlier. I would be failing in my duty if I allowed a potentially unsafe commercial vehicle to continue operating on a municipal road. You understand? He was not asking. The tow truck engine turned over with a diesel shudder that Marcus felt in his chest. Marcus stood completely still on the freezing sidewalk. The crowd muttered. He had lost his cash. He was losing the van. The system had done what this particular stretch of this particular city had watched it do to other people on other Tuesday afternoons. It had done it with procedure paperwork and the language of public safety. The result looked exactly like what it was: a man stripped of his resources in broad daylight by someone who had correctly calculated that the daylight provided cover rather than risk. He looked at his watch. 3:58 p.m. The display read 00000. His hand moved into the pocket of his delivery jacket. Not quickly, not with any drama, just the ordinary motion of a cold man seeking the warmth of his own pocket. His fingers found what was inside it. They closed around it. They held it. The object was solid, cool, and heavier than its size suggested. The specific gravity of something made to last, made to mean something made to be produced at a specific moment and have that production be unambiguous and final. He did not produce it yet. He looked at the van. The front wheels were lifting now as the tow truck's hydraulics engaged, the chassis tilting forward with a groan of stressed metal and rubber, his world going with it at an angle. He thought about everything inside that van. Everything that had been running, recording, and transmitting since the moment Miller's lights first split the gray afternoon sky. He thought about the 5 bills in Miller's pocket with their invisible chemistry. He thought about the countdown that had just reached 0. Is this how it ends? Some part of him asked, not in fear, but in the legitimate professional question of a man reviewing a situation in real time. Did he play it too passively by trusting the process? His fingers tightened around the badge case. Miller thought he had taken everything Marcus had, but the real transaction was only just beginning. The chirp was small, electronically precise, a single sharp note that cut through the diesel grumble, the wind, and the ambient cold of the street with the clean authority of something designed specifically to be heard and understood in exactly this kind of environment. It lasted perhaps half a second. Its effect lasted considerably longer. The van did not move. Stan felt it before he understood it. The sudden resistance transmitted up through the tow truck's hydraulic system, a hardness where there should have been compliance, a refusal where the machinery expected cooperation. He throttled up slightly. The engine note rose. The resistance did not yield. He throttled up again. The van sat on its lifted front wheels with the absolute immovability of a vehicle whose entire electronic architecture had just been instructed by a signal sent from a device smaller than a television remote to become a single unified, locked and uncooperative machine. The steering column was frozen. The transmission was frozen. Every electronic lock in the vehicle had engaged simultaneously. The net effect was that Stan's tow truck was now attached to something with the approximate cooperative spirit of a building. Stan climbed down from the cab. He walked to the front of the van. He looked at the hook. He looked at the front wheels. He looked back at his truck with the expression of a man encountering a mechanical problem he cannot immediately diagnose. He crouched. He looked at the undercarriage. He stood up. He looked at Miller. Miller was looking at Marcus. Marcus had taken 3 steps away from the curb onto the sidewalk. He was standing with his feet at shoulder width, his weight evenly distributed, and his right hand coming out of his jacket pocket. What his hand produced was not a phone, not a weapon, not the cracked plastic clipboard that had been his only visible credential for the past 17 minutes. It was a badge case, brass federal issue. When he opened it with a single practiced motion, the gold of the Department of Justice shield caught the flat gray afternoon light. It threw it back with a clarity that was almost aggressive, a brightness that had no business existing on this particular block on this particular Tuesday. It existed anyway, solidly, without apology. He held it at chest height facing Miller. He spoke. "Marcus Washington," he said. "Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility. Officer Miller, you are directed to remain where you are." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than any that had preceded it on this block this afternoon. The earlier silences had been the silences of suppression, of things not said because saying them carried risk. This silence was the silence of a complete and instantaneous reorganization of reality. The silence of 4 people in one situation all simultaneously processing the fact that what they had understood to be happening was not what had been happening, had not been what was happening for the entirety of the 47 minutes since a patrol car's lights first split the gray sky over the street. Miller did not move. He was for the first time since Marcus had seen him entirely still. "What?" Miller said. The word came out stripped of everything that had been in his voice before. Stripped of the smooth administrative authority, the pleasant contempt, and the tutorial patience. Stripped down to a single syllable that contained nothing but the sudden presence of consequences. "The vehicle," Marcus said, nodding toward the van, "is a federal asset. It has been operating as a bait vehicle under a joint DOJ and FBI municipal corruption investigation covering the 7th and 9th Precinct corridors, Wayne County. It has been equipped since 6 this morning with a 4-camera array providing full 360 video coverage, a directional microphone system with a range of 12 feet in open air, and a cellular transmission unit that has been broadcasting a live encrypted feed to a federal monitoring station since the moment you activated your light bar." He paused for exactly 1 second. "Everything that has occurred on this street since 3:47 p.m. has been recorded in 4K resolution and transmitted in real time to federal storage." He watched Miller's face. Miller's face did the thing that faces do when the blood that normally occupies them receives a message from the brain that it is needed elsewhere. It did not happen dramatically. It happened the way structural failures happen, slowly then suddenly, the color retreating from his cheeks, the reflective surface of his aviator lenses looking even more incongruous, 2 mirrors attached to a man who had just discovered that he had been standing in front of one for the past 47 minutes. "The cardboard box on the passenger seat," Marcus continued, his voice not rising, not accelerating, carrying the specific weight of words that do not need volume because their content is sufficient, "is a federal surveillance housing containing the primary camera array and the transmission unit. The open loop in the van's electronic system you observed as a registration irregularity is a federal law enforcement exemption under Title 18. The delivery manifest is a federal operational cover document." He looked at Miller steadily. "The $500 you accepted and placed in your left breast pocket are United States Treasury bills coded in federal tracking compound registered to this operation under evidence number 477 Alpha. Your fingerprints are currently on all 5. Stan had not moved from the front of the van. I was standing with his hands slightly away from his sides. His gold chain caught the light. His face carried the expression of a man who has just realized that the secondary role he believed he was playing was not secondary at all. Mr. Henderson had straightened up from his cane. Not dramatically, not with triumph, with the quiet, dignified posture of a man who has been waiting a long time for something. He had found that patience, his own and someone else's, was the mechanism by which it finally arrived. Maya had not lowered her phone, but her hands had stopped shaking. Marcus looked at Miller, at the mirrored lenses that had spent the afternoon reflecting everything back without revealing anything. He reached into his inside jacket pocket with his left hand. He produced a folded document which he opened and held toward Miller with the same even, unhurried motion with which he had produced everything else. "This is a federal warrant," he said, "covering this location, this vehicle, and both of your persons. Miller, Stan, you are not free to leave." Miller's badge had given him power over the streets. Marcus's badge had given him power over Miller's entire existence. They came from the north end of the block first. 2 black SUVs moving at a speed that was not quite urgent and not quite casual, but occupied the precise tactical middle ground between those two things. The speed of vehicles that have been waiting 3 blocks away for a specific signal and have now received it. Covering the distance with the controlled efficiency of an operation entering its final phase. They pulled to the curb behind Miller's patrol car in a single fluid sequence. Before either vehicle had fully stopped, the doors were opening. The agents were out. 4 of them in the first wave. Dark jackets with DOJ stenciled across the back in gold letters that caught the gray afternoon light, assertive and unambiguous. A 3rd SUV came from the south end 30 seconds later. Miller watched them come. He had not moved since Marcus told him not to move. He had stood with his weight distributed the way it had been when he thought he was the most powerful person on this curb. He had simply failed to redistribute it, because his body had not yet received updated instructions from a brain that was still processing the gap between what the last 47 minutes had appeared to be and what they had actually been. The aviator lenses tracked the approaching vehicles with the mechanical faithfulness of mirrors, reflecting what was coming without interpreting it. Marcus thought that the lenses had been the most honest thing about Miller all afternoon. Stan sat down on the curb. He did not do it dramatically. He did not do it because anyone told him to. He simply arrived at the assessment that his legs were not going to continue their professional obligations. He made the practical decision to remove the distance between himself and the ground before that distance was removed for him. He sat with his thick hands on his knees. His gold chain hung forward. He looked at the asphalt between his boots with the expression of a man conducting a quiet, extremely unfavorable audit of his own recent decisions. The lead agent, a woman named Reyes, whose jacket carried a federal task force patch on the left shoulder, came directly to Marcus. The two of them exchanged 4 words and a nod that constituted an entire operational handoff. Then she turned to Miller. "Officer Derek Miller," she said, and produced her own credentials with the brisk economy of someone for whom this moment was a procedure rather than a revelation. "You are under arrest for extortion under color of law bribery and deprivation of civil rights under Title 18 United States Code. You have the right to remain silent," she kept going. The words of the Miranda warning had their own rhythm. They had been spoken so many thousands of times in so many contexts that they had become a kind of civic poem. She delivered them without drama and without satisfaction, with the flat professional competence of someone who understood that the weight of the moment did not require her to add to it. Miller said nothing. His jaw was set. His mirrored lenses were forward. He stood through the handcuffing with a rigidity that was the last available form of the dignity he had been spending freely all afternoon. The cuffs went on with a cold metallic click, each link finding its locked position with the mechanical certainty of a thing built for exactly this purpose. Marcus heard the sound. He noted it. He filed it alongside everything else the afternoon had produced. The UV lamp came out when a second agent processed Miller's jacket. It was a small device, handheld. When its light hit the 5 bills in Miller's breast pocket, the effect was immediate and absolute. The tracking compound fluoresced under ultraviolet with a green that had no analog in nature, a green that belonged to laboratories and federal evidence rooms. It was on the bills. It was on Miller's fingers. It was on the inside of his pocket. It was most significantly, absolutely and irrefutably there, visible to every person on this curb. Mr. Henderson Maya, the man in the hard hat who had not moved from the opposite sidewalk and was now watching with his phone also raised, and the woman with the grocery bags who had set them down on the pavement at some point without apparently noticing she had done it. Marcus stood to the side. He watched the process complete itself. He had been inside operations like this before, had reviewed the transcripts of them, had built cases from their documentation, had testified about their methodology in federal proceedings. But there was a specific quality to standing inside one in the field in the cold on the actual asphalt where the actual thing had occurred that the transcripts never fully transmitted. The gap between the document and the event. He had spent 11 years working in the document. This was his 3rd field operation. Each time he was reminded that the document was a compression of something that had volume, temperature, and smell. That had the specific February smell of this Detroit street diesel concrete and cold air carrying the distant suggestion of the river. He walked to Mr. Henderson. The older man was standing with both hands on his cane. His eyes were moving across the scene with a quality of attention that was not triumph and was not vindication, but was something quieter and more durable than either. He watched the federal agents work with the expression of a man who has lived long enough to know that moments like this one are not the end of anything and not the beginning of anything. They are simply moments, real, necessary, and insufficient all at once. "You knew," Mr. Henderson said. It was not a question. "I knew," Marcus said. The old man nodded slowly. "I told you to drive away." "You did," Marcus said. "Good thing you did not listen to me." On the sidewalk, Maya had lowered her phone at last. She was watching Miller being guided toward one of the black SUVs, watching the mirrored lenses, the polished boots, and the tailored uniform moving in the custody of people whose authority had not required sunglasses to announce itself. Her face carried the expression of someone who has witnessed something that has permanently altered the scale by which they measure what is possible on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Marcus looked at the van, still attached to Stan's immobilized tow truck, its front wheels lowered back to the asphalt now, sitting solid and unremarkable at the curb, the cardboard box on the passenger seat still pulsing its quiet red light. True authority does not need to shout on a street corner. It just needs to let the ink dry.
It is incredibly satisfying to watch a corrupt bully who thought he was untouchable walk straight into a trap made of his own greed. If you were in Marcus's shoes, would you have had the patience to hand over the cash just to build a bulletproof case? Or would you have flashed your badge the second he pulled you over? Drop your strategy in the comments below. And if you love seeing justice served cold, hit that subscribe button for more stories.